Peter's convinced that the 21st century belongs to Africa, like all of us, and we can't wait to hear him speak. Peter, you can take the floor.
Thank you so much for that. That was wonderful, and thanks for these 3 days. Yeah, as you say, I'm Peter Burdin. I'm the friend of Dr. Emmanuel. I think Dr. Emmanuel warned you yesterday that I was about to finish off our 3 days of deliberations, and he did say we would end our FutureFest with a bang. So let's all try and achieve that by pulling together some of the themes of FutureFest 2021 and take away some of those great ideas to enrich our future missions and our future lives. As our Provost, Dr. Twala, asked us on our first day, can we do it? Yes, we can, he answered. So first of all, I really want to give thanks to you, Shanghai, and to Dr. Emmanuel and the whole FutureFest team. I mean, it rings in my ears, Kate's beautiful voice, Isaac's choir, you might remember from day one, and message for Nicole Wamboro, where do I get your album? Your sax is absolutely heavenly. So wonderful 3 days, an amazing 3 days. I think though perhaps we should have called it Future Feast, because we've had a feast of new ideas and so much food for thought. I don't know if you caught Dr. Emmanuel's stats of Africa's internet penetration. That alone underlines just how crucial this conference is. 13,000% growth since 2020, 590 million internet users, just shows what a serious topic this is that we're talking about. And just looking at how we opened 3 days ago, where Dr. Twala's wise opening words on digitalization as the new frontier, and how actually the crisis of COVID, which we've all lived through, has actually opened up new possibilities on how we teach, how we look at education. Now it's operating way beyond the classroom learning, and he encourages us to take charge of our own learning journey. And then we heard from Gert Leonard's advice to remember that tech is a tool, not a purpose. And he pointed that in this post-COVID world, thanks to technology, we can stay at home, but can work globally anywhere in the world. I have friends sitting in Nairobi who are holding down now good jobs in New York and Washington. It's a genuine global society, and I think that's been hastened by this pandemic for all the crisis and all the tragedy it's brought. And we heard from our own ALU alumni, Hope Mator in Nairobi, the founder of FamPower, who described her personal journey into digitalization to make sure that we use tech as a lifestyle choice, and how we can choose wisely to limit our screen time and to educate rather than disappear down those internet rabbit holes. I've been fascinated by all these discussions, and as someone who's been a journalist working in Africa for many years, first as the head of the BBC in Africa, and now as a writer, a lecturer, and a member of ALU's Board of Trustees, I've seen just how this digital revolution is transforming all our lives. I'm working, for example, for a new website called Billionaire Tomorrow, which is tracking these great changes as the site's African Continental Free Trade editor. I'm closely following how this new opportunity to create a single market in Africa of 1.2 billion people, they say worth $3 trillion US, and how we're going to be using intra-African trade, which traditionally has been a little too low, how we're using trade between us to lift millions of Africans out of poverty. I'm also working on a British Council project, which is going to provide free digital skills training and mentorship to early stage entrepreneurs in Africa's creative industries. You might recall that our colleague Gert Leonard gave us a free book at the end of his remarks. I'm going to give you a free course. So I'm going to offer free digital training for people working in the creative industries, very much early stage entrepreneurs. And I'll give the details to Dr. Emmanuel later, and I'll put my details in the chat box. So if anyone is interested in getting on a year-long digital skills training course with acceleration possibilities and mentorship, just get in touch with me, because really you're the beneficiaries, aren't you, of this revolution. And the ALU, I always like to think, sits at the heart of it. And really, whenever I go on campus, be it in Rwanda or Mauritius, I'm always blown away by the entrepreneurial energy, what I discover. For instance, when I was last in Kigali, I met a young student, and she's running an agribusiness cooperative for more than 450 farmers. She's training them to make that scale up from subsistence to sustainable commercial opportunities. There's an ALU alumni based in Kenya. She's now running our own African hair products business, and she's trying to get into the lucrative Nigerian market as well as operating in Kenya. And then, of course, here in Mauritius, I've recently profiled in my magazine a young man who set up a job agency in Rwanda, linking up workers in the informal sector with clients who need their skills. And he's on course to create thousands of work opportunities in the next 3 years alone. In the UK, we heard something, I think, of Farai Manjoma in the showcase of entrepreneurs. I work very closely with Farai, and he's now expanding and developing his Sasha network into an international business plan as he does his master's at the University of Edinburgh Business School in Scotland. Now, I was lucky enough to persuade my old employers, the BBC, to make a documentary about Farai on a series called Fixing the World, which highlights attempts to find solutions to some of the world's challenges, very much like the missions and the challenges and opportunities at ALU. But what it meant, this documentary, meant that this former ALU students project has now been exposed to a global audience in excess of 200 million people. Not a bad result for a 22-year-old man from Mutare in Zimbabwe, formerly of ALU Mauritius. Do go to BBC Sounds, the Sounds app, because it's well worth listening to. And in it, Farai makes a very important point that although technology is important, creating a network of mentors and fellow supporters is even more important. As he says in the documentary, Africa has an abundance of talent, but the opportunities are often missing. You can't dream about things you haven't seen. The point he makes is that to succeed, you need a network of people to nurture your talent, to help grow your potential, to make the connections you need, and show you the opportunities that exist beyond your immediate world. Otherwise, he says, you remain blind to the possibilities life has to offer. In the words of ALU's founder, Fred Swanecker, without opportunity, talent is just a compliment. So our mission is to create this new generation of young leaders in Africa and then make sure that they get the connections and the opportunities to become truly global leaders. And I think we've seen some excellent future global leaders in these last 3 days. I've published stories about Farai and about the other cases I've mentioned in some of my magazines, but we really need more stories of African success. So if any of you have a project or a good story to tell, please don't hesitate to get in touch with me at my website, peterburdinafrica.co.uk, and I'll put that in the chat box at the end of this conversation. As Farai says in his documentary, and it was mentioned in one of the breakouts, it takes a village to raise a child, and there's no better example of that than the life of that greatest of Africans, Nelson Mandela, who I was fortunate enough to work quite closely with when I was the BBC's bureau chief in South Africa during his incredible but tortuous journey from prisoner to president. And the key thing is he didn't do it alone. He was just part of a wide movement of people who he was perhaps a figurehead of, but actually a great movement of people who were all wanting change. And just look at the importance of networking in his life. As a boy, he grew up in the royal court of the Tembu king, where he learned the importance of listening to all shades of opinion and governing by consensus rather than ruling by diktat. He went to school, he went on to university at Fort Hare, that great African institution, and there he learned the importance of study and discipline. When he moved to Joburg, he found a lifelong mentor, Walter Sisulu, and they worked very, very closely together, both in and out of prison. He formed a law partnership with Oliver Tambo, another mentor, and Oliver Tambo taught him how to rein in his emotions. I mean, we forget that Mandela was a very angry, very passionate young man, and Tambo directed that passion into really effective channels and encouraged Mandela not to react too quickly. And then on Robben Island, where he spent most of his 27 years in harsh conditions, breaking rocks in the lime quarries and actually being ritually humiliated and abused, but yet he learned to liberate himself from anger and bitterness, and learned how to defeat his enemies by learning everything he could about Afrikaner culture. So he knew how the Afrikaners thought, he knew how they acted, and then he used that knowledge to prevail and conquer and win over from his oppressors. So it really does take a village. I mean, it's not Mandela we hear a lot about. It wasn't a one-off, but he was a product of many people, and many people helped him on that journey, because ultimately it's our community that helps us succeed. Michelle Obama always used to say, we need 3 key people in our lives: someone to walk in front of us to show us the way, someone to walk beside us to support us when the going gets tough, and someone who walks behind us who reminds us where we've come from. I think that's crucial, and who we need to reach out and help so we can put them on their journey as well. Our job is to be human. As Gert Leonard told us on day one, if we become like robots, ultimately the robots will take our jobs. And remember, he said the pace of change is absolutely mind-boggling. The next 10 years will bring more change than the previous 100 years. But the future is better, he says, because we think human ingenuity will ultimately solve most of our problems. Our human kindness, our Ubuntu, and our ability to collaborate will help us. He referred to the 3 Ds of digitalization, decarbonization, and democratization. Digitalization to exploit the benefits of e-commerce and online education, decarbonization to use data to take action to confront climate change, and democratization to maintain freedom in the face of online dictatorship. Actually, I think there's another 3 Ds that I would like to add, probably not quite as positive, because they are division, disorder, disinformation. By division, I mean that the digital world is divisive. It's divided us into opposing camps. We all have a tendency, and I know I'm no exception, to read only online what we agree with and dismiss alternative views. This reinforces our own opinions and closes our minds to those who think differently to us. And I think there's no doubt my views have been strengthened by reading the views of fellow travelers who I agree with. I rarely read what I disagree with. And likewise, I become a little bit intolerant of people I disagree with. You know, going around saying Trump is an idiot doesn't begin to explain why 74 million Americans voted for it. There's got to be something else there, which we're not bothering to explore into, possibly. The second one is disorder. As Min Ling told us, 44 million WhatsApp messages are sent every minute of every day. We can't control it, we can't police it, but it does feed conspiracy theories. I mean, we've seen the anti-vaccine movement during this COVID crisis and the darker recesses of WhatsApp, where the encrypted messages can harbor terrorism. And the third one, I think probably the most crucial, is disinformation. We know there are whole bot factories in Russia and China turning out disinformation, turning out fake news, and probably many other countries churning out these lies as well, designed to confuse or agitate or annoy or just sow dissent in our societies. So I think we all need to be vigilant, and I believe we should all have training on how to verify the news that we read and how we can access sources of fake news outlets rather than take things at face value. We need to learn about verification. Who is saying it? What are their sources? Is it credible? Ultimately, is it true? And I think we all still take things we read at face value a little too much. 100 years ago, there was a very famous British newspaper editor called C.P. Snow, and he once said, "Comment is free, but facts are sacred." And we've now entered this world where comment, opinion, and fact have all got jumbled up together, and it's difficult to know which is which. And I think that's the problem. And I think the final thing, we've heard a lot about platforms and the power of platforms. I mean, I think we've got to be careful in this digital age that the internet entrepreneurs, the Facebooks, the Zuckerbergs, they encourage us to think of themselves as mere platforms. They just host things. Actually, they're publishers, like a newspaper, like a magazine. They publish material. They cannot deny any responsibility for what is published on their sites. And I think the digital future, as it matures, we need to seriously think about how we hold these billionaires' feet to the fire and make them responsible for the fake news and the hatreds that they churn out and promulgate. Of course, the opportunities do overcome the threats, but we must find a way of controlling those threats. And there's a 7th D I'd like to just touch on very, very briefly, and that's our destiny as humans and Africans, and how we use our digital skills to bring our dreams to reality. One of the pleasures of my work as a journalist in Africa is to share stories with audiences around the world, to reveal the truth about our continent that the world doesn't always see or doesn't always want to see. We've got to reveal that Africa really is the home of Yes, We Can. Dr. Emmanuel told us about Barack Obama, an African who embraced Yes, We Can as his watchword. And that's something we should all embrace. Yes, we should embrace how African medical teams are significantly reducing maternal mortality rates, for instance. We should celebrate and embrace how African scientists in Tanzania are training rats to diagnose TB, how Ethiopia is converting street rubbish into a source of energy, providing light while cleaning up its streets. In South Africa, not many people have heard of the Square Kilometre Array project, which is African scientists researching and revealing to the world, the largest telescope in the world, the secrets of how our universe was formed. And most of all, I always think of the young girls I work with in the Cape Flats in South Africa, who we introduced to the basics of space technology. All their lives, they've been told science, maths aren't for girls. And then we saw the joy in their eyes, those light bulb moments when they started learning and they said, yes, we can. And I watched as those young women went on to launch their own satellites and put them into space to help track climate change data across Africa. That data is now being used and is going forward to inform discussions at COP26, the Climate Change Summit, which will be held in Glasgow later this year. So from really, science is not for girls. We now have those girls at the forefront of changing how Africa is going to combat the existential problem of climate change. And I know one of them is studying astrophysics at WITS as we speak, all because someone reached out a hand and said that yes, girls can do science and anything is possible. So we've got to keep telling these stories. We all know the story of William Kwakwamba, the ALU student who harnessed the wind and brought power to Malawi. But there are so many more stories we must tell. And I'm sure many of those stories are actually in this digital room, if you like, as we speak, being incubated, being finessed and ready to be unleashed on the better world. I think if you go to my website, you'll see what I think is quite a nice statement on the front page, because it says, preparing young people for the African century. Some people say that's a pipe dream, some people mock, some people scoff. I believe it's true, and we have another 79 years to make it true, and you are the generation that will achieve that. Look around, the American century is drawing to a close. Unfortunately, its retreat from the world is happening and the most horrific and terrible tragedies unfolding as we speak in Afghanistan this week. The US, a massive military power, rendered weak because it lacks a global and political vision on how to harness that power. The common wisdom is this is the Chinese century. Yes, China is on the rise. It's lifting millions of people out of poverty, but at what price? Only if you agree with the Communist Party. And, Emmanuel mentioned earlier how the Chinese built the AU headquarters in Addis, and then the AU discovered that all the rooms were being bugged and all the information being sent back to Beijing. We've seen pro-democracy protesters in Hong Kong being given low jail sentences, and the building of smart digital cities where everything every citizen does is tracked and counted. And if you get involved in a protest or you do something the authorities don't like, you will lose good citizen points, and that could affect your future, and your kids could be denied a place at university because you are deemed, I don't know what you're deemed, but you're deemed not a good citizen of China. So is that the Chinese century? And is that what we want the Chinese century to be in Africa? So, I think we're left with our wonderful Africa. By 2050, we will have the largest workforce in the world, bigger than China, bigger than India. By the end of this century, 40% of the world's populations will be on this continent, will be Africans or part of the diaspora. Nigeria will have a larger population than the US. This is our moment. This is our time where we will see Africa rise and our Ubuntu will be taken to shine around the world. Finally, I've learned so much to inspire us these past few days, and I hope just this will give you a taste and a few reminders of the journey we've all been on. But here are just a few of the things I've learned from all the speakers these last 3 days. Be brave, take risks. Not everything will come off, but you'll never know unless you try. Be creative. Try new ways of telling your personal story. Ultimately, the story becomes part of your brand. So make it compelling, make it effective. Be beautiful. By that, I mean, everything is about African lives and how we can make them better. One definition of an entrepreneur is to identify a problem and then try and solve it. Remember, it's not about you, it's about the people you need to help and carry forward with you. Be resilient. The Japanese have a great word for it, gambari. It means never give up. So if you get discouraged, go to your friends, let them support you. That's what friends are for. And your support network will strengthen your resolve and help your well-being at the same time when life gets tough. Remember the author of Harry Potter books, J.K. Rowling. She had a Harry Potter manuscript rejected by more than 20 publishers before she hit the jackpot and became the best-selling author in the world. But I think above all, remember your Ubuntu, remember your humanity. As the writer Ernest Hemingway once said, remember your humanity and you can forget everything else because that's what counts. And finally, our great African Nelson Mandela once said that we are part of a long chain of leaders stretching back through the ancestors, in his case, into the Tembu royal family, but also reaching forward to you and your moment in the sun and your generation, and also to your future generations, all contributing to the fight for human freedom and prosperity. As he said, human goodness is a flame that can be hidden but never extinguished. Remember, you ALU students, you are that flame, and your mission now is to take that flame forward, let it burn bright across the continent and out into the world. Yes, we can. In Africa, we can. Let your voices be heard, let your talent be nurtured, and let your entrepreneurial spirit be celebrated in Africa and around the world. Thank you so much. I wish you all every success in this wonderful digital world that awaits you. Thank you for giving me this opportunity, for taking part in what has really been 3 days of the most stimulating conversations. More to come. Thank you very much. Thank you.